Imagine discovering a map drawn hundreds of years ago, yet somehow showing places that, according to history, no one had officially explored. A continent before it was discovered. A coastline hidden beneath miles of Antarctic ice. A vast ocean before European sailors even knew it existed. Were these simply remarkable mistakes, brilliant guesses, or fragments of far older knowledge that somehow survived through the centuries? For generations, historians, cartographers, and explorers have debated a collection of ancient maps that continue to challenge what we think we know about the history of exploration. Some have been explained, others remain deeply controversial, and a few still raise questions that modern science hasn't fully answered. Today, we'll explore 12 ancient maps that shouldn't exist and uncover the fascinating stories behind each one. Because sometimes, the greatest mystery isn't what's on the map. It's how anyone could have known it in the first place. Imagine standing inside the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. The year is 1929. Workers carefully sorting through centuries-old manuscripts hidden inside the palace archives. Most of the documents are exactly what you'd expect: royal records, ancient books, and forgotten scrolls. Then, someone unrolls a fragile piece of gazelle skin. At first glance, it looks like just another old map, but within minutes, everyone in the room realizes they've discovered something extraordinary. This was the Piri Reis Map, drawn in 1513 by Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. At a time when much of the world remained unexplored by European sailors, the map already showed remarkable detail. The western coast of Africa, parts of Europe, the Atlantic Ocean, and the eastern coastline of South America. For historians, that alone was impressive. But one section of the map sparked a debate that continues to this day. Near the bottom, a mysterious stretch of coastline appears. Some researchers have argued that it resembles part of Antarctica, even though Antarctica would not be officially sighted by European explorers until more than 3 centuries later. How could a map created in 1513 appear to show land that had not yet been officially discovered? Piri Reis himself left an important clue. In notes written directly on the map, he explained that he did not create it entirely from his own observations. Instead, he compiled information from around 20 older maps and charts, including Portuguese sources, Arabic charts, and what he claimed was a map associated with Christopher Columbus. That statement raises an intriguing possibility. If Piri Reis was copying older material, where did those earlier maps come from? Over the decades, researchers have carefully compared the mysterious southern coastline with modern geography. Some believe the resemblance is meaningful. Others argue it is simply an inaccurate extension of South America's coastline, a common cartographic error for the period. To this day, no consensus exists. The debate continues because the surviving fragment is incomplete, and many of the original source maps Piri Reis mentioned have never been found. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't whether the map shows Antarctica, it's whether fragments of much older geographical knowledge survived, long enough to reach the desk of an Ottoman admiral in the early 16th century. But the Piri Reis map wasn't the only chart that seemed surprisingly advanced for its time. Just a few years earlier, a German cartographer published a world map that appeared to reveal an entire ocean before European explorers officially knew it existed. Imagine being a scholar in Europe. The year is 1507. For centuries, people believed the world consisted of only 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. Then, news begins arriving from sailors returning across the Atlantic. Christopher Columbus had reached unfamiliar lands. Amerigo Vespucci insisted these weren't the eastern shores of Asia, but an entirely new continent. It was one of history's greatest geographical puzzles. Among those trying to solve it was a young German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller. Working inside a small printing workshop in Saint-Dié, France, he set out to create one of the most ambitious world maps ever produced. The result became known as the Universalis Cosmographia. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary Renaissance world map. But look closer and something extraordinary appears. For the very first time in history, a map labels the newly discovered land, America, named after the explorer Amerigo Vespucci. That alone changed history forever. But another detail has puzzled historians for centuries. Waldseemüller's map clearly separates the newly discovered continent from Asia, leaving a vast ocean between them. Today, we know that ocean as the Pacific. But when this map was published in 1507, no European expedition had officially crossed or mapped the Pacific Ocean. Vasco Núñez de Balboa wouldn't even see it until 1513, 6 years later. So, how did Waldseemüller reach a conclusion that seemed far ahead of his time? Most historians believe the answer lies not in hidden knowledge, but in careful reasoning. After studying the reports of Amerigo Vespucci, Waldseemüller became convinced that these lands were too large and too different to be part of Asia. It was an extraordinary intellectual leap, one that transformed how humanity understood the world. Even more interesting, Waldseemüller later changed his mind. In later editions of his maps, he removed the name America, believing Columbus deserved greater credit for the discovery. But history had already made its choice. The name remained. Today, only a single original copy of the 1507 map survives. Preserved inside the Library of Congress, it is often called America's birth certificate. Not because it solved every mystery, but because it forever changed the way humans saw the planet. But while Waldseemüller was redefining the shape of the world, another remarkable map was being created in Portugal. One so accurate, it may have revealed secret voyages that were never officially recorded. Imagine living in Europe. The year is 1502. Across the oceans, Portugal has become the world's greatest naval power. Its explorers are returning with knowledge no other kingdom possesses. New coastlines, hidden trade routes, and entire lands unknown to the rest of Europe. But this information isn't shared. It's protected, like a military secret. Official maps are locked away, hidden inside royal archives. Revealing them to a foreign nation could be considered an act of treason. Yet, one man was determined to steal that knowledge. His name was Alberto Cantino. Officially, he was an Italian diplomat working for the Duke of Ferrara. Unofficially, he was gathering intelligence on Portugal's greatest advantage, its maps. Through secret negotiations, Cantino managed to obtain a copy of one of Portugal's most valuable navigational charts. He secretly sent it back to Italy. Today, that remarkable document is known as the Cantino Planisphere. Created in 1502, it is one of the earliest surviving maps to reveal Portugal's discoveries across Africa, India, Brazil, and the Atlantic Ocean. But one feature immediately caught historians' attention. The map shows an unexpectedly detailed stretch of the South American coastline, far more complete than many believed was possible at the time. Some researchers have also pointed to landforms that appear surprisingly advanced for such an early date, suggesting Portuguese navigators may have explored much farther than official records describe. Most historians believe the explanation is straightforward. Portugal was conducting extensive voyages in secret, carefully surveying new coastlines, while deliberately keeping that knowledge hidden from rival kingdoms. The Cantino Planisphere wasn't impossible because it contained mysterious technology. It was remarkable because it accidentally exposed information that an entire empire was trying to keep secret. Today, the map offers historians a rare glimpse into one of history's greatest intelligence battles, a time when geographical knowledge was more valuable than gold, and a single stolen map could shift the balance of global power. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't what the Cantino Planisphere shows, but how many other secret maps history never survived at all. But while Portugal was hiding its greatest geographical discoveries, another mysterious map appeared decades later, claiming to reveal voyages across the North Atlantic, long before Columbus ever crossed the ocean. Imagine discovering an old wooden chest, hidden inside your family's home for generations. Among faded letters, weathered journals, and forgotten documents, you find a strange map. It tells the story of two Venetian brothers, Niccolò and Antonio Zeno. According to the documents, they sailed across the North Atlantic more than a century before Christopher Columbus, visiting distant islands, unknown kingdoms, and mysterious northern lands that few Europeans had ever described. For years, it sounded like little more than a family legend. Then, in 1558, a descendant of the Zeno family published both the letters and the map. Almost immediately, it became one of history's most controversial charts. Known today as the Zeno Map, it appeared to show parts of the North Atlantic with surprising detail. Greenland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and several mysterious islands that don't appear on modern maps at all. One feature attracted particular attention. The map seemed to depict Greenland with mountains, rivers, and interior landscapes at a time when most European maps showed little more than an icy coastline. How could its creator describe territory that was largely unknown to Renaissance Europe? Some researchers have suggested the map preserved information from much older voyages, possibly based on lost Norse knowledge passed down through generations. Others believe it simply copied earlier nautical charts that no longer survive. But many historians remain unconvinced. Modern scholarship has identified numerous geographical mistakes, invented islands, and inconsistencies that strongly suggest the map was created long after the voyages it supposedly describes. Some even argue the entire story was an elaborate attempt to glorify the Zeno family's place in history. Without independent evidence, the original expedition cannot be confirmed. Yet, the mystery refuses to disappear. Because behind every disputed map lies an important question. Where is the line between history, legend, and forgotten memory? Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't whether the Zeno brothers reached distant lands, but how can stories survive for centuries, long after the evidence has faded away? But while the Zeno map blurred the line between history and legend, another remarkable chart would do something very different. It attempted to map the entire known world, with an accuracy that still astonishes historians today. Imagine walking into a quiet monastery. The year is 1450. Inside, a monk stands before an enormous circular map, nearly 2 meters across, covered with thousands of handwritten notes, cities, mountains, trade routes, and distant civilizations. This wasn't simply a map, it was an attempt to capture everything humanity knew about the world. Its creator was Fra Mauro, a Venetian monk widely regarded as one of the greatest cartographers of the Middle Ages. For years, he collected information from merchants, explorers, Arab navigators, travelers returning from Asia, and ancient geographical texts. The result became known as the Fra Mauro Map. At first glance, it looks unlike any modern world map. South is placed at the top, north at the bottom, a style influenced by many Islamic maps of the period. But its orientation wasn't what made historians take notice. Its accuracy did. Long before the great European voyages of exploration, Fra Mauro produced one of the most detailed maps ever created. It showed Africa, India, China, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia with remarkable precision for the 15th century. Even more intriguing, one handwritten note suggests that a ship had successfully sailed around the southern tip of Africa decades before Bartholomew Diaz officially rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488. If true, it would mean knowledge of that route existed earlier than many people realize. Most historians believe Fra Mauro wasn't recording a secret expedition, but compiling reports from experienced merchants and sailors who traveled through vast trading networks connecting Europe, Africa, Arabia, and Asia. His greatest achievement wasn't discovering new lands. It brought together geographical knowledge from many different cultures into a single masterpiece. Today, the Fra Mauro map is considered one of history's greatest cartographic achievements. Not because every detail proved correct, but because it reminds us that knowledge has never belonged to one civilization alone. Ideas, maps, and discoveries have always crossed borders, long before modern globalization. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden inside the Fra Mauro map is that history isn't written by a single explorer. It's built from countless journeys, shared across generations. But while Fra Mauro was collecting knowledge from merchants across the known world, another civilization, thousands of kilometers away, created a world map so advanced it would leave modern historians asking one remarkable question. How did medieval Korea know so much about the rest of the world? Imagine standing inside the royal court of Korea. The year is 1402. Europe is still struggling to understand the true shape of the world. Many coastlines remain incomplete. Entire continents are still unknown to Western explorers. Yet inside the Joseon dynasty, a group of scholars is creating a world map unlike anything seen before. not based on a single voyage, but on knowledge gathered from across Asia. That remarkable masterpiece would later become known as the Kangnido Map, created more than 90 years before Vasco da Gama reached India by sea, and decades before Columbus completed his famous voyage across the Atlantic. The Kangnido Map presents an astonishing view of the known world. China dominates its center. Korea is carefully detailed. Japan appears clearly to the east. But what surprised modern historians wasn't Asia. It was everything beyond it. The map also includes recognizable outlines of India, the Middle East, Africa, and parts of Europe. For a map created in East Asia during the early 15th century, its global perspective was extraordinary. How did Korean scholars acquire information about lands thousands of kilometers away? Have those few people in East Asia ever visited? The answer lies in one of history's great trading networks. Rather than relying solely on Korean knowledge, the map's creators combined Chinese geographical records, information carried along the Silk Road, Islamic maps, diplomatic reports, and centuries of observations accumulated from merchants traveling between East and West. It became one of the earliest surviving examples of truly international cartography. Of course, the map wasn't perfect. Africa appears compressed, Europe is distorted, and many coastlines differ from modern geography. But perfection was never its greatest achievement. Its true significance lies in something far more remarkable. It proved that knowledge was traveling across civilizations long before the age of exploration officially connected the world. Ideas crossed deserts, mountains, empires, and oceans. Long before many explorers fill today's history books, the Kangnido Map reminds us that no civilization discovers the world alone. Every generation builds upon knowledge passed forward by countless others. And sometimes, the most remarkable maps aren't the ones that reveal unknown lands, but the ones that reveal how deeply connected the ancient world already was. But while Korean scholars were bringing together geographical knowledge from across continents, a mysterious map discovered centuries later would spark an entirely different debate. Some believed it proved Vikings reached North America long before Columbus, until modern science uncovered a shocking truth. Imagine walking into a quiet library. The year is 1957. A rare book dealer carefully places an old manuscript onto a wooden table. Inside, bound between medieval pages, lies a simple parchment map. At first, it doesn't seem extraordinary, but then one name catches everyone's attention: Vinland, a land far beyond Greenland, drawn on a map that appeared to date back to the 15th century. If authentic, it would completely change the history of exploration. For centuries, most people believed Christopher Columbus was the first European to reach the Americas, but this mysterious document suggested something very different. It appeared to show a land matching the region of modern-day Newfoundland, where Viking explorers led by Leif Erikson are now known to have established a settlement around the year 1000. When the map became public in 1965, historians were stunned. The parchment itself appeared medieval. Its style matched maps from the period, and many believed they were looking at one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. For decades, the Vinland Map became one of the world's most famous historical documents. Books were written, researchers debated its authenticity, and museums displayed as possible evidence that knowledge of North America existed in Europe long before Columbus. Then, modern science entered the investigation. Using advanced chemical analysis, researchers examined the ink in extraordinary detail. The results changed everything. The parchment may have been centuries old, but the ink contained titanium dioxide in a modern manufactured form, a pigment that wasn't commercially produced until the 20th century. In 2021, Yale University announced that the Vinland Map was almost certainly a modern forgery drawn on genuine medieval parchment. One of history's greatest cartographic mysteries had finally been solved. Or had it? A new question immediately emerged. Why would someone create such a sophisticated forgery years before archaeologists confirmed the Viking settlement at Lonso Meadows? Whoever created the map possessed remarkable historical knowledge, even if the document itself wasn't authentic. The Vinland Map reminds us that archaeology isn't only about discovering ancient objects. Sometimes, it's about uncovering the truth behind the discoveries themselves. and occasionally, the story of a forgery becomes almost as fascinating as the history it tried to imitate. But while the Vinland Map was eventually exposed by modern science, another ancient chart continues to divide historians even today. A map so mysterious, some believe it preserved memories of an Ice Age world, long before recorded history even began. Imagine standing at the edge of Siberia, not today, but nearly 20,000 years ago. The world is locked in the grip of the last Ice Age. Temperatures are far colder. Sea levels are more than 100 meters lower, and between Asia and North America, there is no ocean. Instead, a vast stretch of land extends across the horizon, hundreds of kilometers wide, covered with grasslands, rivers, and herds of mammoths roaming freely. Today, we call this lost world Beringia. It became one of humanity's greatest migration routes, allowing ancient people to gradually reach the Americas thousands of years before written history began. As the Ice Age ended, the glaciers melted, sea levels slowly rose, and Beringia disappeared beneath what is now the Bering Strait. For more than 10,000 years, no human would ever see that landscape again, or so it seemed. Then, in 1559, an Ottoman cartographer named Hajji Ahmed published a remarkable world map. At first glance, it looked like many Renaissance maps of its time, but in the far north, one unusual feature stood out. The map appeared to show a broad land connection between Siberia and Alaska, a striking feature like the ancient Bering land bridge. How could a 16th century map include something that had vanished thousands of years earlier? Some researchers believe it was nothing more than an educated guess. Large portions of the Arctic remained unexplored, and many Renaissance cartographers filled unknown regions with speculative coastlines. Others argue the resemblance is simply a coincidence. After all, ancient maps often contained imaginary islands, missing coastlines, and geographical errors. Yet the comparison continues to intrigue historians. Was Hajji Ahmed copying an older source now lost to history? Or was the land bridge simply one of many fortunate guesses made during an age when much of the world remained unknown? Without the original sources used to create the map, we may never know. But the mystery highlights something important. Maps don't only record geography, they also preserve the ideas, beliefs, and knowledge of the people who created them. Sometimes, those ideas prove astonishingly accurate. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes, they leave questions that continue to challenge historians centuries later. But while one mysterious map appeared to preserve memories of a world lost beneath the sea, another chart became famous for a completely different reason. It claimed to show North America centuries before Columbus, only for modern science to uncover an unexpected truth. Imagine being one of the greatest cartographers in history. The year is 1569. Sailors from across Europe depend on your maps to cross dangerous oceans, navigate unfamiliar coastlines, and reach lands few people have ever seen. Your name is Gerardus Mercator, a man whose revolutionary map projection would shape navigation for centuries. Even today, modern world maps still use a version of his famous projection. But hidden within one of Mercator's greatest works is a mystery that historians still discuss today. At the very bottom of his world map, Mercator drew an enormous southern continent, a place he called Terra Australis. At first, that might not seem unusual. Many scholars of the time believed a vast southern landmass must exist, balancing the continents of the northern hemisphere. But Mercator didn't simply sketch an empty outline. He filled the continent with coastlines, mountain ranges, and geographical details. Centuries later, when Antarctica was officially discovered in the early 19th century, some researchers noticed surprising similarities between Mercator's illustration and parts of the real continent. Was it an extraordinary coincidence, or evidence that Mercator had access to older geographical sources now lost to history? Most historians favor a far simpler explanation. Mercator was heavily influenced by classical geography, especially the ancient Greek belief that a large southern continent must exist. His map combined existing reports, mathematical reasoning, and educated speculation. In other words, it reflected the best geographical knowledge available in the 16th century, not secret expeditions to Antarctica. Even so, the mystery refuses to disappear, because Mercator himself wrote that many parts of his maps were compiled from earlier sources, some of which no longer survive. Exactly what those sources contained, we may never know. Today, the Mercator map reminds us that every great map is both science and imagination. It records what people knew, what they believed, and sometimes what they hoped existed beyond the horizon. Perhaps that's why this remarkable map continues to inspire debate. Not because it proves Antarctica was discovered centuries early, but because it captures humanity's endless desire to explore places no one had ever seen. But while Mercator imagined a mysterious continent at the bottom of the world, another French cartographer produced a map that would become even more controversial, one that appeared to show Antarctica in astonishing detail, centuries before anyone officially reached it. Imagine opening a beautifully illustrated world map. The year is 1531. Europe is entering the age of exploration. Ships are crossing unfamiliar oceans. New coastlines are appearing almost every year, and much of the southern hemisphere remains a complete mystery. Among the era's greatest scholars was a French mathematician and cartographer named Oronce Finé, renowned for combining mathematics, astronomy, and geography into remarkably detailed maps. But one of his creations would puzzle historians for centuries. At the very bottom of his world map, Finé drew an enormous southern continent, not as a vague outline, but as a detailed landmass with sweeping coastlines, deep bays, mountain ranges, and rivers flowing toward the sea. At the time, no European explorer had officially reached Antarctica. In fact, the continent wouldn't be sighted until nearly 300 years later. So why did Finé include such an elaborate southern land? Some researchers believe the resemblance to Antarctica is extraordinary. They argue that when the map's projection is adjusted, certain coastal features appear surprisingly similar to parts of the Antarctic coastline. This idea became especially popular during the 20th century, fueling debates about whether Finé had access to much older geographical sources. But most historians remain cautious. The concept of a vast southern continent, known as Terra Australis, was already common among European scholars. Many believed such a landmass had to exist, simply to balance the continents of the northern hemisphere. From that perspective, Finé wasn't documenting a hidden discovery. He was illustrating a widely accepted geographical theory of his time. Even so, the remarkable level of detail continues to attract attention. Was it artistic imagination, mathematical speculation, or fragments of older cartographic traditions that have since disappeared? No surviving documents provide a definitive answer. Today, the Oronce Finé map remains one of history's most fascinating cartographic mysteries. Not because it proves Antarctica was known centuries before its discovery, but because it reminds us how difficult it can be to separate scientific reasoning from historical coincidence. Sometimes, a map becomes famous not for the answers it provides, but for the questions it refuses to let us stop asking. But while Oronce Finé imagined a mysterious southern continent, another French cartographer made an even more astonishing claim. He drew Antarctica not as one landmass, but as two separate continents, decades before anyone had ever seen it. Imagine standing inside the French Academy of Sciences. The year is 1739. Explorers have crossed vast oceans, mapped new coastlines, and expanded humanity's understanding of the world. Yet one enormous mystery still remains. Far beyond the Southern Ocean, no one has officially seen Antarctica. It exists only as a theory, a blank space on nearly every map. Then, a respected French geographer named Philippe Buache publishes a remarkable new chart. At first glance, it appears to show the familiar idea of a southern continent. But look closer, and something extraordinary emerges. Instead of drawing Antarctica as one continuous landmass, Buache divides it into two massive regions, separated by what appears to be an inland sea. For the 18th century, it was a breathtakingly unusual idea. No explorer had ever reached the continent, no survey existed, no satellite images, no aerial photography. So why would Buache imagine Antarctica in such an unexpected way? Nearly 2 centuries later, scientists began studying the hidden landscape beneath Antarctica's enormous ice sheet, using seismic surveys and radar technology. Those studies revealed something fascinating. Beneath the ice, the continent is divided by the Trans-Antarctic Mountains, creating two major geological regions separated by deep basins. Some researchers have pointed to this similarity, suggesting Buache's map was astonishingly ahead of its time. But historians offer a different explanation. Buache wasn't working from secret expeditions. He was developing scientific hypotheses based on the geographical ideas available during his lifetime. He believed Earth's continents and oceans followed natural patterns, and used those theories to predict what might exist in unexplored regions. In other words, his map was an educated scientific proposal, not a record of direct observation. Even today, scholars continue debating whether the resemblance to modern Antarctica is meaningful or simply an extraordinary coincidence. What makes the Buache map so remarkable isn't that it solved the mystery of Antarctica. It's that it reminds us how powerful human curiosity can be. Sometimes, a scientist dares to imagine what cannot yet be seen, and years later, parts of that imagination unexpectedly resemble reality. Whether coincidence, brilliant reasoning, or something else entirely, the Philippe Buache map remains one of history's most fascinating cartographic puzzles. But while Philippe Buache imagined the hidden shape of Antarctica, one final map would become the most controversial of them all. A map that has inspired debate for more than 5 centuries, leaving historians to ask one final question. Was it simply an extraordinary coincidence, or the greatest cartographic mystery ever created? Imagine living nearly 2,000 years ago. No satellites, no airplanes, no GPS, not even a magnetic compass. Yet one man attempted something almost unimaginable. He wanted to map the entire known world. His name was Claudius Ptolemy, a Greek mathematician, astronomer, and geographer living in Roman Egypt during the 2nd century AD. Around 150 AD, Ptolemy wrote a remarkable book called Geographia. Rather than simply describing places, he introduced something revolutionary, a mathematical system for locating them. Using lines of latitude, longitude, and thousands of geographical coordinates, he created one of history's first scientific frameworks for world mapping. Although his original maps were eventually lost, his writings survived. More than 1,000 years later, during the Renaissance, European scholars carefully reconstructed his world map from the coordinates he had recorded. The result transformed cartography forever. For the first time, mapmakers weren't relying only on stories from travelers. They were using mathematics, measurements, and a structured geographical system. Of course, Ptolemy wasn't correct about everything. He underestimated the true size of the Earth. Asia stretched far too far east. The Indian Ocean was shown as a closed sea, and entire continents remained completely unknown. Yet despite these mistakes, his methods were centuries ahead of their time. In fact, Christopher Columbus relied partly on Ptolemy's calculations when planning his famous voyage west across the Atlantic. Ironically, one of Ptolemy's greatest errors helped inspire one of history's greatest discoveries. For nearly 1,400 years, his ideas shaped how civilizations understood the world. Kings, explorers, scientists, and navigators all built upon the foundation he created. The Ptolemy World Map reminds us that history's greatest maps aren't always the most accurate. Sometimes, their true importance lies in changing the way humanity thinks, not by revealing every answer, but by giving future generations a better way to search for them. Perhaps that's why, after nearly 2,000 years, the legacy of Claudius Ptolemy still lives on, because every modern map, in one way or another, still follows the path he helped create. We've now explored 12 remarkable maps. Some transformed the history of exploration, some challenged accepted ideas, some were later proven wrong, and a few continue to inspire debate even today. Whether they were brilliant scientific achievements, educated guesses, or mysteries that may never be fully solved, they all remind us of one simple truth. Every map tells a story, and sometimes the greatest mystery isn't what's missing from history, it's how much humanity managed to discover with the tools they had.